Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Am I Missing Something? It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
First one of these we've done in a while, and if you've never joined us for one of these before, this is kind of our commentary platform. We talk about all different topics. It's usually not to mock, ridicule, or anything negative. It's all just about some conversation and a topic that we thought about. We're like, am I missing something about this particular thing? And in recent conversations, Zach and I have been throwing around Guns N' Roses. They released an album back in 2008. You might have heard of it, called Chinese Democracy.
15 years ago, by the way. Sorry to make you feel old.
We're just going to ignore that. And since then, they reunited Duff and Slash and Axl, the three original members. And, they had a successful tour. And then they go back to doing, their usual. They're just releasing singles. Are we ever going to get a full brand new album from Guns N' Roses? But the biggest question that I think we were asking ourselves was, why just singles? Why is Guns N' Roses teasing us along instead of just giving us a brand new album?
It's kind of sad that we're not even as excited for quote unquote new music from Guns N' Roses as we should be. I mean, I think if you listen to any of our episodes, you know full well that Matt and I are huge Guns N' Roses fans. I think the first concert you and I ever saw together was the first Guns N' Roses reunion tour of Slash and Duff at MetLife in 2016. Matt will be the first to take pleasure in noting that he witnessed me crying like a 12-year-old fan at a Backstreet Boys concert, just at the sight of Slash and Axl together on stage.
I was going to say Taylor Swift, but okay.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I just dated myself. Sorry. But
sorry, shake it off.
Fair enough. Oh, nice one. But a little history. In 2021, out of nowhere, Guns N' Roses releases a single called Absurd. A few things made that absurd. First, there wasn't really much hoopla, other than, started teasing that they were going to release it and maybe start playing it live. And then also kind of people going, wait, this is Silkworms. For those of you unaware, during the many, many years that they worked on Chinese Democracy, Axl had recorded a lot of material, some of which never went past demo phases, and a lot of which still got leaked, and even some songs played live. And one of the songs that they actually were in the demo phase of and played live a few times in 2000, 2001, maybe even 2002, was a song called Silkworms. And if you heard that song when it came out in 2000, it was very industrial inspired. And apparently over the years, they decided not to include it in Chinese Democracy. But Chris Pittman, one of the keyboarders during that period who didn't make it during the reunion tour, had noted that they actually made it, at some point a little bit more rock driven. So suddenly here we are in 2021 with a song that even they admit is just a reworked version of Silkworms. And then a few weeks later, they did a similar thing where they released another song, a single called Hard School. And while that definitely sounded a little bit more like classic Guns N' Roses sound, a lot of fans were also quick to note, no, this is also another old leaked Chinese Democracy era demo song. There's various titles. At one point, I think it was called Jackie Chan and some other title. So then 2021 happens, and we had two new singles. Cool. Does this mean more is going to come? Well, radio silence then. Pretty much as soon as they came out, as soon as basically Guns N' Roses act like it didn't happen, the following year, each band member kind of did some more solo projects. 2023 comes along, they're back on tour, and wouldn't you know it, another song, another new single called Perhaps. And again, no one in the Guns N' Roses camp is denying that this was a reworked song from Chinese Democracy era demos. They definitely were like, this involved Slash and Duff's involvement a little bit more. Here we are yet with another Guns N' Roses single that was basically a reworked version of Chinese Democracy demo. And they were also announced that in over the summer when they released this digital version of Perhaps, that it would be released on 7-inch vinyl with another song. But then as of right now, of us recording it, that vinyl got pushed to December. It's called The General. Sorry, if you're noticing a little trend here, basically, not only are we having Guns N' Roses just sporadically release singles, but basically reworking a bunch of Guns N' Roses demos from the Chinese Democracy era. And you could even question how much are they really reworking. In fact, while I was just preparing for this episode, I discovered that Brain, the drummer during a good chunk of the Chinese Democracy era of the band, actually plays drums on these recordings instead of Frank, who's the current drummer of Guns N' Roses. So what gives? Why are they just doing a bunch of sporadic singles? And why is it just a bunch of leftovers from Chinese Democracy? So I guess to start us off, before we even go down the rabbit hole of why, Matt, what are your thoughts on the actual singles themselves?
Well, first off, I was going to go with the obvious joke here that leftover Chinese is the best Chinese.
You see, I'm not a fan of Chinese food in general, so I would definitely disagree with the leftover part. But anyway, would you say that this leftover Chinese is delightfully delicious, or should you have thrown it out in the garbage a while ago?
Absurd is really take it or leave it, in my opinion. Hard Skool is probably the best one, and I think perhaps trying too hard. They're okay. I mean, they're not, the Guns N' Roses that I really think of when I want to listen to Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
I would even take Shadow of Your Love over these singles, and that was the single that they released when they re-released Appetite for Destruction.
I mean, that was just literally recorded in 1987, so of course that was going to be phenomenal because that was the band at their height. I would actually argue that Hard Skool was the one that sounded a little bit too forced in that. That was almost recorded in the hopes of, hey, any fan that didn't realize that Guns N' Roses released anything after Appetite for Destruction, they'll enjoy this song. Whereas, at least with Perhaps, I actually enjoyed how it kind of felt like it could have easily felt in Chinese Democracy, but on the better side of that album. It was kind of an interesting mix of some classic rock feel to it with the modern edge that they were trying to go with a song like Better, which, by the way, Better is still a very underrated Guns N' Roses song. But the thing I actually kind of there's a few things that annoyed me with the singles, but what annoyed me with Perhaps, well, two things really, in that I listened to all three singles back to back. And while the production is actually relatively good with songs, with the Absurd song and Hard Skool, something about the production feels really off with Perhaps. Like I went from listening to Hard Skool, which was very crystal clear and the volume was perfect, and then suddenly Perhaps comes on and it just felt like everything was just lowered. Like everything just didn't. It sounded all softer, as if they didn't turn the volume all the way up when they were recording it. It was just very kind of like disjointed feeling, going from very loud to just soft. So from a production level, I think that the new version perhaps really lacks. And I think the other thing that lacks, maybe more so than the other two songs, is I don't really feel like I hear Slash. I slowly started to hear a little bit more. The more I listen to Absurd and Hard Skool, I hear a little bit more of Slash's involvement, but still kind of like, that's what kind of bothers me more about these singles, is that if you had told me that Slash actually didn't appear on any of these songs, I'd be like, you know what, that makes sense. For someone who has such a distinct guitar tone and sound, like the second you hear a note from him, whether it's his solo material, Guns N' Roses, or even Velvet Revolver, you know it's Slash. And during these songs, I'm like, I don't hear Slash. Like, was he even in the studio? Like, to the point when, like, over the summer, as we're preparing to hear Perhaps, a photo of Axl and Slash in, like, just posing for a photo with some producers in a studio. To me, that was the most exciting thing ever. I'm like, oh my God, they're actually in a studio together? They're actually hanging out with each other outside of a stage? That's amazing. I don't hear that on this song. On any of those songs, really. I don't hear Slash really even playing, let alone in the same room. I don't know if you felt the same way.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was maybe one of the last power plays that Axl is making. Like, if you think about it, during Chinese Democracy, Slash wasn't really involved in that. And Axl.
Well, no, he wasn't involved at all because he wasn't in the band.
Well, right. So, but if you're saying that these are leftover Chinese Democracy, I mean, to a certain extent, he is involved a tiny bit. But Axl could be making a power play here and saying, I wrote these songs when you weren't around, and I just want you to put like a little bit here and a little bit there, and we'll call it okay, and we'll call it that you're on it and you're a part of whatever this is. And he's wanting to collect a paycheck, so he's like, yeah, sure, whatever.
I'm sure that is. I think it's just still, and truth be told, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of what we hear, and these songs, I have no proof of this, other than I tried to find some of the original demos that got leaked. Not entirely sure I even found the right ones, but from what I've kind of heard, Absurd, yeah, they've added definitely more of a rock vibe to it than the original 2001 version, but perhaps the demo, the leaked demo I heard, it's almost nearly identical to what we hear currently. Maybe a slightly different guitar solo, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of what we hear, at least from like Axl's parts and the drums, it might just be what was originally recorded in the early 2000s. As I mentioned before, apparently Brain does appear, the drummer, on these songs, which is especially surprising given that a little history here. When Brain got brought in to become Guns N' Roses' new drummer, he replaced Josh Freese, currently Foo Fighters drummer, but at the time a well-known, respected session drummer. And even though everyone loved how his appearance on the album and his drumming because he recorded with the album, they decided, you know what, we need to re-record these drums to sound a little bit more lively, or just because he decided to leave the play in a perfect circle. And literally, even Brain is like, yeah, when I was told what to do, they were like, no, we want you just to play note for note what Josh did. We'll even give you a teleprompter so you know what to play. So it's almost like, wow, like for so basically someone they just wanted to have replicate someone else's drums. You would think they would just want to get a different drummer in there too. Did they just reuse Brain's old parts? To your point, I'm sure this really was a money grab. But then what's kind of weird is that if this is just a money grab or just a way to like get people to buy tickets to the tour, the way that they released the singles, it wasn't even like, hey, we're about to announce a tour, here's a new song to get you hyped. These songs were like kind of released in the middle of a tour, like perhaps was released in the middle of their last US tour, and they didn't even have like any physical copies of this song to sell at these shows. So it's like, what was the point then if it wasn't to try to sell more tickets? You know what I mean?
If they're going to release it, it's just to keep their name out there, right? Like if you can't go to the tour and you don't want to pay the absurd prices, see what it did there? This is a way to keep people interested in Guns N' Roses or potentially get you to buy tickets because, oh my God, Guns N' Roses is releasing new material. And it's a way to keep their name in people's ears. Because if you think about it, right, why does a band release a single? A band releases a single because it wants you to get hyped for the band coming out with a new album and then coming back around on tour again. It brings their names back to the public. And while they may have had big news because they were on tour, if you're not looking for this information, sometimes you're not going to find it. So if you're just like the casual rock radio station listener, you're not necessarily going to, pay attention to this. So if Guns N' Roses is putting out new material, while you say to get people hyped up for a tour, I say that even if the tour was going on, it could get people hyped up to find out if they're going to be on tour. And if they are on tour, oh man, I got to get tickets like right now. I also think that depending on, and I just don't know the timing of this, but if they released it in the middle of the tour, where were they on tour? Because they could have been going to places that they don't necessarily need to sell or to not to sell, but to like push Guns N' Roses all that hard. Like if they were going to South America, Guns N' Roses, I think, would be huge in South America. And if they announce that Guns N' Roses is going to be coming there, the tickets are going to sell out regardless. In North America, maybe not a harder sell, but you might need a little bit more convincing in North America to go back to Guns N' Roses in 2021. Because it would have been the second time that they came around, right?
Third, or at least third, if not more.
Right. So, I mean, whatever it was at the time, you got to figure, okay, well, they got our money back in 2016. How are we going to get their money again? Okay, well, let's put out some new music. So people have something new that they may want to hear when we come back around. So,
but then doesn't it kind of defeat the purpose that the song is just kind of okay at best?
It's a name that you don't think you're going to hear new music from ever again, right? Because when they came out the first time on tour, there was nothing really backing it except that, holy crap, the big grab was Slash and Axl together again. One of the truly monumental moments in rock over the last 15 to 20 years. That Axl and Slash, after all the bickering and fighting, and I believe Axl called Slash a cancer, or Slash called Axl a cancer. Somebody called somebody cancer. I mean, those are fighting words there. So it's like, for these guys to finally bury the hatchet after all of these years and step on stage together, how would it come out? So that was your grab the first time. What's the grab the second time? Because they're going to be back together again. Okay, let's put out some new music.
But
even if it is a reworked song from Chinese Democracy.
I just feel like, though, that's it just seems like you've suddenly then diluted. Granted, maybe they just never intend to ever release new music, period. Or a new, not new music. That they never intend to release a new album, period. So they might as well do singles. But like, to me, this approach almost then dilutes the announcement that Guns N' Roses are going to come out with a new album with Slash and Duff on it for the first time since 1993, whenever Spaghetti Incident came out.
I don't think people necessarily care like to that level, like, or like they don't care about it to that level like we care. Like, to us, it's a big deal that they're going to be putting out new music together again. To them, it's like, all right, well, here's this piece of music. Slash, throw your guitar on here. Duff, throw your bass on here. Let's get this thing out the door. We need to put out some new music. We're going to be on tour.
Just seems like a missed opportunity, though.
All of it's a missed opportunity. Because what they
Chinese Democracy, period, is just a missed opportunity.
Chinese Democracy. Oh, hold on. So if we want to get into Chinese Democracy real quick.
Yeah.
Because we do have the other episode that we did on Chinese Democracy.
Yeah, but we can also discuss a little bit further. Let's not rush that.
So Chinese Democracy was so huge that even in hushed tones over the years that it didn't come out, you had people throwing down the gauntlet to get this record released. And I vividly remember this, and I mentioned this in the episode that we did. I have the stupid coupon that Dr. Pepper put out because they made a commercial back before Chinese Democracy was released, because it was going on for so long. And, you know, it picked up a little bit of steam, like, oh, is it going to come out? Is it going to come out? Is it going to come out? And Dr. Pepper threw down and said, you know what? We'll give everybody in America a free Dr. Pepper if Chinese Democracy is released. Go to our website, put your email address on there. We'll send you a coupon if this thing ever comes out. And lo and behold, it came out. And in my email came the coupon from Dr. Pepper. And I printed it out, and I have it in my book with all my concert tickets because I'm weird like that. But you see where I'm going with this, though. This album was huge, and they made such a big stink about this thing for so long that you had people pushing from all industries to get this thing out the door.
So I would, though, argue that Chinese Democracy is actually a great example of also an album that Guns N' Roses is fully responsible for its failure, essentially. Because two things happened. You mentioned so much hype about it. People were clamoring for leaks of the album, for live bootlegs of the songs that they performed live, trading them and, posting them online. So, numerous delays and rumored, release dates that never came to be. So then when in 2008, when they finally confirmed that, yes, Chinese Democracy was finally coming out on November 23rd, 2008, it was going to be a, physical, Best Buy exclusive. Two things ended up happening that basically sabotaged that album's success. First, literally Axl Rose did no interviews until after the album came out. It was with Billboard basically trashing the entire marketing experience. Literally no marketing was done from the band involved, which made everyone question, is this real? Is this really happening? And then the other thing that
need to at that point.
Yes, they did, because no one trusted. This wasn't even just like, oh, I'll just listen to it online whenever. No one trusted that this was actually a legit thing, that Chinese Democracy might actually hit shelves on the date that they were saying. They needed Axl Rose to be like, listen, this is finally happening. I'm so proud that this is finally coming out. And we also needed him to confirm who was even in the band, who was even on the record. He did nothing to support its release until years after it came out. And then the other thing that really ended up, I would even say more so, kill the Chinese democracy buzz was, and we don't talk, I don't think history talks about this enough. Now, again, this is going to outdate us all, but this was during the MySpace era when you started to have bands premiere songs on MySpace. Remember that little music player where you get to choose a few songs you want to share with your friends? Bands are taking advantage of that real estate space and would premiere new songs via there. And Chinese Democracy, about a week before its release, Guns N' Roses management label, they decided a week before its Chinese Democracy's release to premiere the entire album on MySpace. You could listen to Chinese Democracy for free a full week before you could buy the copy in Best Buy on its shelves. And guess what happened? People listened to it and they went, Not, again, some people have looked back on it. We've done a review on it. We've looked back on it and had mixed feelings about it years later. But at the time, a lot of the diehard Guns N' Roses fans who were waiting to hear the final product, especially those who maybe, wish they would be more Appetite for Destruction era Guns N' Roses, they listened to songs like Shackler's Revenge, like If There Was a Time, songs that just were either a little bit odd or just kind of slow. And they went, is this really what we waited for nearly 10 years? Is this the album that we've been clamoring for? And guess what ended up happening? Barely anyone bought Chinese Democracy. It still went platinum, yes, but for an album that should have been the biggest release of the decade, it ended up becoming only at number 3 on the Billboard charts and underperforming in its first week. And as a result, it just was underwhelming, period, to the point that it took another 2 years for Axl Rose to finally hit the stage and tour with his new lineup. And it just was underwhelming. For one of the most overhyped albums, it just came out to an underwhelming response. Which leads me to Matt, it sounds like you have a response to that, but I do have another question I want to follow that up with.
I just think that no matter what happened to Chinese Democracy, it was never going to live up to the expectation. The hype was too big, and nothing is ever going to fulfill that. The moment that it blows up bigger than, like, let's face it, like right now, like Taylor Swift, and I hate that I brought her up a second time in this episode, but
I like her.
Her music right now is bigger than music itself. Taylor Swift is her own thing right now. And at the time, Guns N' Roses was bigger than music when this whole Chinese Democracy thing was happening. Like, it didn't matter what else was happening in music. Guns N' Roses was getting ready to release Chinese Democracy. Finally, we were going to get the answers that we've been waiting all the years for, and after all of the hype, it's finally coming. So no matter what happened, I don't care what band was going to put out a new album. I don't even think Tool's last album was hyped as much as Chinese Democracy, and that album was hyped too.
Well, different bands. I mean, Guns N' Roses that's comparing apples and oranges, but I would still argue that but hype-wise too, like they killed their own momentum in 2008 by the lack of press and basically giving the songs away for free at a time where it was actually hard. You had to really search hard to get free music, and here you were. All you had to do was go to MySpace to listen to the entire album and realize, you know what? Maybe I don't need to spend $20 on a physical copy of this. I want to bring up a scenario here. So, to kind of blend in with our other series, What If? I want to paint a little picture. We talked about how, the fact that Guns N' Roses even released an album in 2008 was remarkable, and kind of the, hype died down pretty fast leading up to its release. At the same time, in 2008, Axl's former bandmates, Duff McKagan and Matt Sorum, were kind of going through their own problems. They were in the band Velvet Revolver that in 2004 experienced major success with their debut album Contraband with Scott Weiland on vocals. First off, it's crazy that almost 20 years ago, Velvet Revolver came out, and reinvigorated rock scene at the time. I mean, they really just took everyone by surprise to the point that like people were actually excited to see Velvet Revolver, not just, oh, the guys from Guns N' Roses and Stone Temple Pilots singer. But fast forward to 2008, a year after the lukewarm response to Libertad, the sophomore album, Scott Weiland was starting to act like Scott Weiland. Suddenly, he kind of just quits the band. The band implodes. And it took a few years for them to all say, you know what? No, it's dead completely. Like, there was definitely a few years where you hear rumors that they were in the studio of Corey Taylor testing out demos, or they were testing out this singer, or they're testing the waters, and it just all fell flat. But I want to propose a scenario, remembering again the lack of interest from Axl Rose even to promote Chinese democracy and the implosion of Velvet Revolver. What if Chinese democracy didn't come out in 2008 at least? Maybe shortly after Velvet Revolver Call It Quits, maybe a few years. What if Chinese democracy never came out until Axl reunited with Duff and Slash? And kind of like how we are experiencing right now the singles, what if Axl Rose waited to release Chinese democracy until he had Slash and Duff add their parts to the album? So that when Chinese democracy came out, it actually was an album with Slash, Duff, and Axl, maybe even Matt Storm at the time if they decided to bring him into it. Would Chinese democracy have gotten a better response?
I don't know. If we're talking hypothetically, if the songs that are on the album now had the flavors of Slash and Duff, I don't think the songs would have even been as interesting as they are now, because some of the most interesting parts on that entire album are from Buckethead. And Buckethead is a very different guitarist than Slash. Slash is, in comparison to him, very traditional. And these songs needed some flair. And that flair came from Buckethead. So if you try to put Slash in those roles, it might have sounded more traditional Guns N' Roses, but I think they would have come off more of B-side classic Guns N' Roses, kind of like Shadow of Your Love was left on the cutting room floor. I think this might have been another left on the cutting room floor sounding song.
Well, I do want to also give a little bit more credit to Robin Fink as well, because I think he is such his role in Guns N' Roses. Of course, everyone loves him from his work in Nine Inch Nails, but I think Robin's worked with Axl, especially on the song Better and This I Love, very underrated, to the point that he was in and out of Guns N' Roses for a little bit because Axl was like, no, I need Robin back. And rightfully so. But to your point, I can kind of see that happening if they had brought Slash, but at the same time, I mean, we've seen Guns N' Roses play songs off Chinese democracy. We've seen them play, especially songs like Better. And I would argue that Slash, yeah, he added some of his own flair to it, but it wasn't necessarily all that drastically different. And it sounded pretty cool, dare I say. So I don't know if it would have been too far off. And I also, it's so tough to really determine who, during the Chinese democracy era, who really contributed the most to what. Because there's even some debates among fans as to, at least during the demo phases, what was Robin's parts versus was this actually one of the infamous Brian May demos that they had. So for those who aren't aware, Queen's Brian May actually recorded some stuff for Chinese democracy that it doesn't seem like ever actually got used for the final album, but it's still debated whether or not any of the demos that we've heard feature him, or even if any of what he wrote ended up getting used and just re-recorded. It's still kind of like up in the air. The overall creation of Chinese democracy is just so complex that it's so difficult to really determine what we even ended up getting was really what we were even supposed to. Given Axl's lack of promotion for the album, it's so possible that what we ended up hearing was not even final. So I don't know if how much Slash would have changed the music, or if it really would have ended up being just B-side Guns N' Roses.
I do kind of feel the same, that it was such a hodgepodge at that point. I think one of the movies that kind of really nails this is like Dewey Cox, the Walk Hard story. like the whole scene where he's bringing everybody together to complete his masterpiece.
That
Like
goat is
this,
on that record more than me. I love that line.
but it's like that's what Chinese democracy was. It was just what are we doing? Okay, well we're gonna do this because we need this to sound bigger and we need it to sound better and we need X, Y, and Z and we need this and that. Like there was so much on there that I don't even think that you could keep track of everybody who they need to credit on the album, because if you read the liner notes to this and you look at who's on the album, it reads like a short novel. It's ridiculous.
And I think that's also something that was working against Chinese democracy too. And I think we touched upon this also in our revisit of Chinese democracy, but which, by the way, we did 5 years ago to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of it. Sorry to make you feel even older, Matt. But I think that's part of the problem, is that like people love the notion that Guns N' Roses was a 5-member gang, essentially. Whereas suddenly you had Chinese democracy that was literally just, as you mentioned, just random musicians all over the place. I mean, hell, even like, I mean, granted, this, oh my God, the song wasn't in Chinese democracy, but was on the soundtrack for End of Days and kind of released around, recorded around the same time. But that freaking had Dave Navarro on it. Like, literally, Josh Freese, I think, still has some song credits or songwriting credits on Chinese democracy, which is a style. I just love that trivia fact, too, is that Josh Freese, the current drummer of Foo Fighters, played a critical role in Chinese democracy. It's people joke like, oh, that should have just been the Axl Rose solo record, but in reality, yeah, it really should have been, because it just didn't capture the same. Even Use Your Illusions was still, you had a feeling that there was a core group of musicians involved, whereas here, like it's even debatable how involved Axl was at certain points, because you hear stories of him in the studio for a few weeks and then suddenly just disappearing for a few more weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Which then brings us back to, then why are we hearing outtakes from Chinese democracy now? Are they really that desperate just to like keep their name out there, that they would almost tarnish their reputation by releasing half decent songs? Because let's be honest, at best, they're okay.
There's a couple things at play here, right? So at worst, you get Slash and Duff and Axl on some new tracks, quote, new tracks together, and they fall flat. And okay, so they're just singles. It's not like they put together a whole, either A, new album, or B, a mediocre B-sides lost track type album, and it goes nowhere. So 3 songs, no harm, no foul.
But wouldn't you rather just hear a full album?
Well, that's the other part, is that they could be testing the waters for what type of sound to go for on a new album. Now, they could be doing that because, like you mentioned, like they had an industrial song, they turned a little more rockish in Absurd. Hard School sounded a little like old school Guns N' Roses, and perhaps to me sounds a little more like Use Your Illusion-ish. So they're trying to test different types of sounds to figure out, well, what do people want from something new for Guns N' Roses? And we could be falling right into their hand. We don't know what their intentions are. And if they are to just cash grab on them going on tour, great, fine, whatever. Once again, no harm, no foul. 1 song or 2 songs in 2021 and 1 in 2023. No harm, no foul. If they did a whole new album and they were all over the place and it was as focused as Chinese democracy was, then you know what? Then we're going to be like, well, is this it for Guns N' Roses? Are they done? Is their honey pot, empty at this point? Because let's face it, if they bombed on a new album and they came out and they played it live and you didn't get to hear all of the Guns N' Roses classics that you wanted to hear on tour, people are going to start to stray away from the band. So once again, singles might be the way to go. No harm, no foul.
I do like your theory of this could just be them testing the waters, be like, all right, are fans actually liking us going the old school, like school direction, or are people recognizing it as just us trying too hard to sound old school, or no pun intended there? Do fans are digging the perhaps sound of the kind of the mixture of the Use Your Illusion with the modern sound? That very fair. I just wonder though, like, how much longer can they really do this before people just don't give a crap, period?
I think that's actually starting to happen
Yeah.
because I was like you and I when we heard that they were going on tour in 2016, jumped at the opportunity. Since then, in the subsequent tours that they've done, I really could care less. I'd be like, okay, they're going on tour. Tickets are $100. Nope, I'm good. Saw them. Pass. And with them releasing, perhaps, I really didn't know that they released perhaps until a couple of months after they released it. Like, oh, okay, well,
Well, yeah, they really just kind of undersold it.
right. It's like, oh, well, okay, it's a new Guns N' Roses quote, new Guns N' Roses song. You know what? I'm kind of okay with, missing it for a couple of months. I'm not beating myself up over it. It's really, they haven't done anything in the recent past to prove that they've earned my and others' attention. Until you prove that you can come out with focused music and a focused album and not just put out a single to test the waters, there's no reason for me to pay attention.
Why do you think
that's my opinion?
What do you think is holding them back from even trying? Like, do you think
Really?
well, I mean, it seems like they get along well enough to at least keep touring every other year. It maybe really is they're just like, you know what? Let's not screw up a good thing. Let's not
Yeah. Living's
spoil
expensive.
extensions. Well, it's expensive. And you know what? Screw it. Maybe they also realize, to kind of what we've alluded to already, who really gives a crap about new Guns N' Roses? No one's coming to see us live to hear us perform a new song called Perhaps. They're coming to hear us sing Sweet Child of Mine. They're coming to hear us sing Welcome to the Jungle. Let's just keep doing that. We're all happy. We all enjoy playing these songs together. And then in between, we still do our own solo albums. We still tour of our own solo bands for a little bit. And then we come back and collect the paycheck and play and enjoy each other's company for a little bit. Why potentially ruin a good thing by making us go into a studio together where we will probably butt heads over where a guitar solo should go, or is that a good chorus?
And that's exactly why I think you will never truly get new Guns N' Roses material. And that's another reason why the singles are good, because here's an entire song that's laid out. Let's just fit the puzzle pieces together.
But does that depress you?
No, it doesn't depress me. Let's face it, right?
Like, if it didn't risk the chance of them going at each other's throats, would you actually like to hear a new Guns N' Roses album? Or are you okay in life? Are you okay with just them touring off of the greatest hits?
Well, I could tell you that we would do the finest damn review of that album if it ever did come out.
Yes, we would, and it would be on any streaming platform you can imagine. Add up a footnote.
But I think that my interest would be piqued because, like I said, it would be a focused, complete effort. It wouldn't be them going through and fitting the pieces together and Slash just having to sprinkle his guitar magic here and Duff putting his bass magic over here, and preconceived pieces that are just in need of a little rework, and Slash and Duff happen to be the guys. I think the band would at least benefit a little bit because it would put a little bit more respect on Guns N' Roses' name, in my opinion. But once again, I could be completely off base that, Guns N' Roses is, a perfectly good band, right now in 2023 going into 2024. And they don't need any more respect to be put on them. For me personally, I think that with the job that they're doing on tour right now, it's just fine. They're doing their thing. They're playing Sweet Child of Mine. They're letting the drunk people sing along, and it's great. You know what? Life is good in Guns N' Roses world, but as they start to age and as their fans start to age, and let's face it, as things get more and more expensive, you got to give people a reason to want to come back and continue to sing Sweet Child of Mine with you in a 90,000 seat stadium instead of a 5-seater SUV driving down the highway at 55 miles an hour.
I think I would, to your point also, to give me a reason to go see them live again or to be invested again. I think selfishly, I would like to hear them at least attempt to make a real new album to at the very least give off the illusion. See what I did there? The illusion that that to at least give the illusion that they're not just touring to cash in a paycheck, even though I know that's probably what they're really doing. To at least give the illusion that Slash is going, you know what? No, I'm not just doing this so that I can fund my solo project. I'm doing this because I want to be in Guns N' Roses again. I want to actually be a contributor, which I know is not true. I know it's still the Axl Rose show and that Slash and Duff are employers of the corporation known as Guns N' Roses. And I know that, and the pessimist inside me is going, they'll just disappoint you if they did do an album. They'll just disappoint you. Don't get your hopes up. And it kills me. What happened in my life where I became such a pessimist that I can't even have a little hope that maybe Guns N' Roses could still do another good album?
You hit the nail on the head. Slash has his own project. That's his passion project. If he wanted to come work for corporate Guns N' Roses, it would have to be under the right circumstances. And unfortunately, I think that right now there is one big driving force that keeps Guns N' Roses happy, fed, and on the road, and it goes by the name of Live Nation. I think that there's things at play that we don't know about, that they are trying. They're like, guys, there's money to be made here. Look, can you please just get along? Can we put you in separate hotel rooms or trailers or whatever, and then you guys come out and just act nice on stage together, and we stay out of the news, and everybody, earns, millions of dollars, and we're all happy, right? Like, can we just do that? Axl, what'll it take for you? Slash, what'll it take for you? Duff, what it'll take for you? And they worked it out. And they figured out the secret formula to get them all together and make them all happy. But do you really want to go work for corporate Guns N' Roses and put together a album that may or may not come off the right way? No. And you can hear that when Slash did his solo album, or he does his solo stuff with Miles and the Conspirators, you hear everybody on the same page, and you hear a great rock album, and you may be getting some of that Guns N' Roses magic that you're not getting from Guns N' Roses because there's no heart left in it. It's just a corporate grab. It really should be Guns N' Roses with the big Guns logo in the yellow circle and in the lower right-hand corner stamped, sideways, because that's cool. Brought to you by Live Nation.
Yeah. I wish that wasn't the good case, but I can't argue too much on that. Matt, I'm curious. Do you remember where you were when you first found out that Slash and Duff were coming back to Guns N' Roses?
I probably was doing research for the radio station I was working for at the time, and I found out through looking and getting all of the beat sheets and understanding, what was going on in rock music. And I remember that I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of big. Yeah, I wish I had a better story, but I think that's probably what I was doing.
This might come off as a humble brag. I apologize, but basically, I pretty much found out a good few months before because, for those of you who aren't aware, I used to do music PR. And one of the last bands I did PR for before I basically was like, you know what? I am done with the music industry. Just at least working in the music industry. Was a band called the Dead Daisies. And if you're not familiar with them, they're basically a super group that had a lot of members going in and out of it from various 80s and 90s hard rock bands. And at the time of when I was working with them, both Dizzy Reed and Richard Fortus of Guns N' Roses were in the band. And this was 2015, where it was the Revolution album that they were doing with, which actually is pretty good, dare I say. Dizzy and Richard did a great job with whenever they got asked questions in interviews about the Daisies, about Guns N' Roses. They just kind of like, no, we're just taking a break right now. And no news is good news. Like really dodging any questions about what could the future look like for them. And as we were kind of just like getting press materials ready, somehow one of my coworkers was like, hey, I heard a rumor that Guns N' Roses were supposed to be playing Mayhem Fest. But the reason why Mayhem Fest's lineup this year kind of stunk was they were supposed to play and then they pulled out the last minute because they decided they're going to instead prep for a reunion tour with Slash and Duff. And then another person I was working with, they're like, wait, how'd you know that? Because he was a little bit closer with that Daisy's management. And at that point, I kind of discovered that it was the worst kept secret within the industry that, yes, in 2016, Slash and Duff were going to be back in Guns N' Roses for at least the tour, probably a little bit more, depending on how successful it was. And even at that point, it seemed like Izzy was not going to be in it. And even like, I remember even asking, like, well, who's going to be on the drummer? Matt Sorum, I'm assuming. And they're like, I don't even know. At that point, I even knew it was like, yeah, it wasn't going to be Steven Adler. No one in the band trusted him to stay clean. And it didn't even seem like they were interested in having Matt Sorum come back. So it was one of those just like kind of cool to be behind the scenes in the industry to find out like, no, it's definitely happening. And then a few months later, I was already at that point done and out of the music industry. That's when the rumors finally hit the web. And you started to go to movie theaters and seeing them do teasers of the tour that they finally announced December of 2015 or January of 2016. But I just remember like, not in this lifetime is actually happening. It was just still funny. Everyone knew, yeah, this is happening, but no one still really knew, yep, this is the lineup. It's like everyone still was like, huh, are we even sure that Richard's in the band? And even he's on an interview saying he's still in Guns N' Roses. It was just, it was an interesting time, to say the least. And then fast forward, Matt and I got to share our very first concert together. So a little kind of behind the scenes and how, like, yeah, basically even as far back as 2015, maybe even 2014, it was the worst kept secret in the industry that, yeah, this reunion was happening.
You know, isn't it kind of funny that you just mentioned like people in the band didn't know if the band was going out on tour or if this was actually really happening?
I mean, no, they knew. Well, they knew, but it was more so like no one really knew outside of like management who was going to be the drummer up until that point. At that point,
right.
All anyone knew was that, like, all right, you could even argue because, like, apparently in January when they announced, yep, this is definitely happening before they announced anyone but Slash, Duff, and Axl. Chris Pittman, that keyboardist who I mentioned earlier, was like saying, like, yeah, I'm so excited, this is so great, and then suddenly he wasn't a part of it, and it was basically, I think, kind of revealed that maybe like they had told members, the current incarnation, like, yep, this is happening, but then once it was announced, they're like, all right, cool, so here's your new contracts. And it was like considerably less money, or like they were reduced to basically, again, employers instead of band. It was kind of unclear, but also kind of bizarre that like even up until April of 2016, which is when they played their first show at the Troubadour and then Vegas and then Coachella, it wasn't like the lineup didn't really seem firm.
But isn't that apropos for Guns N' Roses, right? Like everything is so fly by the seat of our pants. It's not, it's never, here's the new album from Guns N' Roses, and here is the lead single off of it, and here is the band that is on the album. And, there's not, you never get the warm and fuzzy feeling that this is actually happening with Guns N' Roses. It's like, if this is like the band's MO and this is what they think is good PR, it's really not, and they need to fire whoever is doing this. Like they need to just do the traditional things for once and make it right,
That's always pissed me off about Guns N' Roses over the past 2 decades was how untraditional their approach to PR and marketing has been for the band. I remember even in college doing a case study about how and I mentioned before, but just how botched the promotion for Chinese Democracy was. Nothing that they've done is conventional, and it's not even a good unconventional. It's not like we're just challenging the system. It's like, no, it's just done poorly to the point that it's amazing to think that since April of 2016, that this lineup of Guns N' Roses is still together. Like, that actually is amazing, that like Slash is still playing with Axl, that Duff is still there, that no other member has switched places since 2016, that this lineup has actually stayed intact for that long. That's
People
actually,
like
I mean,
that
think
money.
about that. How amazing is that? It's been about what, 8 years? It will be 8 years. Like, I can't do math right now, but like, that's almost like the longest stretch of period that there hasn't been a change in Guns N' Roses lineup.
Money makes people do weird things. That's all I'm gonna say.
And by God, good for Guns N' Roses that they can still generate that kind of money that make people go, whatever. That
It's
might be
true.
the saddest statement I've ever said, but my God, here we are. So one final note before we wrap up this kind of depressing conversation. Let's be real, because I want to be I want to be. You mentioned it before, the fact that like that warm fuzzy feeling with Guns N' Roses is gone. Like, I'd say after the first 2016 tour, that warm fuzzy feeling left pretty fast. Let me ask you this: would you be more inclined to see Guns N' Roses, this lineup, live again with a new album behind it, or Guns N' Roses with another band co-headlining? And if the latter, which band would you go, man, Guns N' Roses on tour with them? I got to go see that tour.
It probably have to be the co-headlining tour.
And who would that co-headliner be? Mixture and like being realistic as to like, all right, this is a band that also could really benefit from a co-headliner. And the reason why I bring it up is because a certain musician of a certain band has said this lineup makes complete sense. And I don't necessarily know if I really would want to see it because it's involving two singers who, dare I say, aren't really great live anymore. But John 5 is like, yeah, Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue co-headlining stadiums together. That's a win, which I don't think I would rush to see that because we've talked about our mixed feelings with Motley Crue in numerous episodes, including a recent one where we discussed the legal battle between Mick Mars and Motley Crue. Go listen to it on a streaming platform. But I can't deny that that would definitely bring in massive money for both bands. If the Def Leppard and Motley Crue tour are any indication, then yeah, that you put Guns N' Roses on last, but give Motley Crue some big space on the billboard, that would definitely draw some numbers. But is there a band that you would go, if Guns N' Roses did a headlining tour with this band, take my money now?
Take my money now.
To suggest one.
Go on.
I hate saying this because let's be real, this particular band, they don't need a co-headliner. They're still selling out stadiums on their own. They're even doing only 5, like they're selling out 2 nights in each market. They're only doing like a handful of markets and they're still breaking records. They don't need any co-headliner, but just from the sheer historical relevancy of Guns N' Roses and Metallica co-headlining stadiums together after the infamous 1992 tour that led to riots in Montreal because James had an incident on stage where a fire went too fast and sent him to the hospital, and Guns N' Roses decided, no, we don't want to follow that, and just kind of causing a rift there. Just the idea of, after all this time, Guns N' Roses and Metallica back on tour together. I mean, they've co-headlined festivals in the past on different days, and they're all friendly again with each other. So there's not that much like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But still, just the idea that like Guns N' Roses and Metallica hitting the road together, I gotta believe that would, draw a lot of money, and that would maybe convince me to go. Like, maybe I will go to that show. I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. I don't think that's realistic. So maybe like I'd probably go back to the drawing board of thinking like who realistically would make me go, man, those two bands together, gotta check that out. But I feel like something about Metallica and Guns N' Roses together, and who knows, maybe even if it's more of just like 5 shows only across the country. Who do you got?
I got it. Because they just released some new music. What if co-headlining tour between Guns N' Roses and Judas Priest?
That
Yeah,
that's not a co-headlining tour to me. That's
you
the
don't think
same.
so?
I like the bill, don't get me wrong. That to me is the equivalent of, and I say this with, I love Alice in Chains. We love Alice in Chains. That's the equivalent of having Alice in Chains opening for Guns N' Roses on select dates as a special guest. Love Judas Priest. That'd be cool. That would be awesome to see. I don't think that's a co-headlining tour. I think that's with special guest Judas Priest. And like, there's no question as to who goes on last. There's no question on whose name appears up top. No, just to Judas
Well,
Priest.
hold on. Let's be realistic here. Is any band's name going to be as big as Guns N' Roses on the Billboard, no matter who it is?
Oh, wait a minute. Nope, I thought of it. And I know in theory, yeah, this band doesn't need Guns N' Roses. They can sell out stadiums on their own. But also, given the history between these two bands, and also, let's be real, maybe this band realizes, yeah, we're really old and we need a little extra help convincing people to come out to see us. And they could even maybe go back and forth. And this band would probably top Guns N' Roses on the bill, but still be a strong co-headliner. AC/DC. Seeing AC/DC and Guns N' Roses on tour together, that would be a big deal. And that it's a little, again, AC/DC, especially given the fact that they've only done one show together since 2016. And that was that Power Trip. But I feel like that could be a freaking people coming out of the woodworks to make people go, like, oh man, I gotta see Guns N' Roses again. They're with AC/DC. That's insane. That would be those two bands would complement each other. And then think about it. Have Axl Rose join AC/DC on stage for a few songs for old shits and giggles, because given that they had Axl Rose replace Brian Johnson for the tour. In fact, there was even like it seemed like a very good chance of like Axl even appearing on Power Up. I don't know if there was any truth to them actually recording of Axl Rose, or if that was just a rumor, or if maybe they did record it and they just felt, now we need Brian Johnson back, at least for the album. But man, and I could even see AC/DC going like, you know what? Let's be real. We're all a little older. We could maybe use a little extra help. I don't know. That would make me go, yeah. Especially because also I say this, I've never seen AC/DC live. I keep kicking myself every time they come to town. Be like, man, I should have gone to that show. Whenever they do come to town, like, or before, I'm like, I'll catch them next time, and I always regret it afterwards not going. That would make me go, yeah, I need to go to that show. Even more so, and I say that again, anyone who's listening to this podcast, I am the biggest Metallica fan. Even more so than seeing Metallica and Guns N' Roses together. I feel like seeing AC/DC and Guns N' Roses together, that would be the ticket of the year, maybe even decade.
I don't know about decade.
Maybe of rock, at least.
I don't know. I agree with you. It'd be big. I don't know if it'd be the ticket of the decade, but crazier things have happened.
It would be a freaking hard ticket to get. So many people would be busting out their old leather jackets for that show. Hell, throw in Judas Priest as an opener for that. Talk about a dream lineup, actually. Because I will say, as disappointing as it might have been for people, for those of you who might not remember, the Power Trip Festival, where they had Guns N' Roses and Iron Maiden play one night, AC/DC and Judas Priest one night, and then Metallica and Tool together one night. Ozzy Osbourne was supposed to play the AC/DC night. Of course, we all know Ozzy is still recovering and really not doing great health-wise. So Judas Priest replaced him on that show. I mean, AC/DC and Judas Priest alone, that's a cool tour. But man, that would be pretty cool to see Guns N' Roses, AC/DC. You could even make the argument that like maybe they try to pull like I'm thinking back to like the Big Four shows, where it wasn't necessarily a whole tour, but they would do like one show in the East Coast, one show in the West Coast, one show in this country and that show. Maybe they even like find a way to do it so that it's like AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest. One night only in New York City, one night only in Hollywood. Like, you get those 4 bands to fill up some big stadium. That could be really cool. And that
Those
way,
are the
also
worst types of shows, though. I don't like that format.
See, I actually, well, having gone to the Big Four show at Yankee Stadium, I would beg to disagree. It was a great show because each band played an actual set.
That's not saying the show isn't going to be great, but from the perspective of trying to get tickets and trying to go see that show, especially if it's one night only, that's awful.
Yeah, but it saves them a little face too, so that doesn't just devalue the experience of seeing it in any market. But yeah, I feel like AC/DC would be a perfect fit for a Guns N' Roses tour. Probably AC/DC would have to close every night, but if there's any band that Guns N' Roses would probably accept second billing, it's with AC/DC. Who would be a band? So I mean, you said Judas Priest. Would you be going back to the Motley Crue suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Would you pay money to see Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue?
Nope.
If they did tour together, no.
Nope. I'm convinced Vince Neil cannot sing anymore, and
he would make Axl Rose look like the best singer alive, though. So maybe that's a plus.
Axl isn't terrible. He's not the reason why I wouldn't go.
He was great when we saw him in 2006, or at least maybe I was delusional in 2016. I was just excited to see them. But man, the footage I've seen of the past 2-3 years, even some friends who went to see them in 2021, my friends were like, listen, Slash was great, Duff was great, Axl needs to retire.
Okay, hang on. You're telling me that Axl Rose, in the realm of cringeworthy performances, he is worse than
I'm not saying.
Hold on. Right. So, if you had me rank the worst 3 vocalists in the last, call it 15 years or so, 15 to 20 years, I would say Vince Neil, David Lee Roth, and Axl Rose wouldn't even be in this consideration. But since you're bringing him up, I'll throw him in here, and he would be a very distant third to those other 2.
I'm not saying he's a worse singer than Vince Neil. What I'm saying, because let's be real, a pig being brought to slaughter would sound better than Vince Neil live. If Vince Neil actually tried to sing, because let's be real, there's backing tapes now. Sorry, not to get too sidetracked. What I'm saying is that seeing Vince Neil live would make seeing Axl Rose live much better. So that's why maybe another pro to see Motley Crue open for Guns N' Roses would be like, well, at least Axl sounds better than Vince. That's how I would leave the show. That's all I'm saying. But I'm also saying that, let's be real, Axl Rose has not sounded that great. You look at even some of the high-res footage that they've released, and you go, oh boy, Axl, what have you done these past few years? What have you done? So, but you have no interest, or what hasn't he done to maintain that golden voice? So Motley Crue, nope, that's not enough for you to consider seeing Guns N' Roses.
No.
And I say this because I also feel like we talked about Alice in Chains. If Alice in Chains actually opened for Guns N' Roses in our markets? Because every show that Alice in Chains has opened for Guns N' Roses in the past 5+ years has not been in the tri-state area. If Guns N' Roses came to MetLife with Alice in Chains, would that entice you?
Nope.
Is that because you've seen Alice in Chains live enough? Is it just because it's still just not worth the ticket price? It's not worth the hassle of going to MetLife?
Correct. The last 2. There is very little that you're going to do and convince me of to go see Guns N' Roses live. A, because you are going to have to jack up the ticket prices an exuberant amount. I'm kind of tired of Sweet Child of Mine. And if you add Alice in Chains on the show, A, I think they'd blow them out of the water, and B, the ticket prices are going to be even more insane. So any of these other, quote, lesser bands than Guns N' Roses that you're adding on are really big name bands that have a very high price ticket draw themselves. So
interesting you say about also the fear, not the fear, but the idea that, because I was going to ask you, what about newer bands? Like, no, but then the concern being either it's just going to be too expensive or the opening band's going to blow them out of the water. I think we kind of lucked out also. Sorry, Lenny Kravitz, but we kind of lucked out that it was Lenny Kravitz when we saw opening for Guns N' Roses when we saw them, because we all were kind of just like, what is Lenny Kravitz doing here? It's just question and scenario. If Izzy Stradlin came back to the band, would you go see them live with Izzy?
No.
Still no. Still too expensive.
Gimmick.
Fair enough.
You need something. You need the entire original lineup to show up, and then possibly, but still, Sweet Child of Mine still sounds just as good with the new members as it does with the old members.
You're just over Guns N' Roses, period, it sounds like.
I'm over Guns N' Roses from the perspective that I'm going to still be hearing Sweet Child of Mine and November Rain, and I like November Rain, but if you don't have any new tricks, like I would almost be okay with the Beatles love treatment to pick your Guns N' Roses album of choice.
I would actually love to see you saying Beatles love, making me think like, man, Cirque du Soleil Guns N' Roses, that would be kind of interesting.
Almost like a demonic Cirque du Soleil. That'd be quite interesting.
That would be
there you go. There's your gimmick. There's your gimmick. That might get me to go see it.
That would be a hell of a Vegas show. Circus of Destruction.
I can't believe they don't have a song called Circus of Destruction.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you know what? I think that's a great time now to turn it over to you, listeners. Are Matt and I absurd, bringing it back to the original topic, for thinking about the way they're approaching their sporadic singles, our lack of excitement for this first set singles and tour? Are you excited for everything? Are you loving what you're hearing? Do you want more? Are you wishing they would do less? Or what are your thoughts on the current state of Guns N' Roses? And do you also feel old that Chinese Democracy is about to turn 15 years old? God, I hate saying that out loud. But let us know what you think on Facebook, X/Twitter, Threads if you're still there, Instagram, TikTok, @Epic Footnote. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll hear a ton of episodes featuring Guns N' Roses, including, as I mentioned, our revisiting of Chinese Democracy when we celebrated its 10th anniversary a few years ago. Plus a ton of other episodes just featuring Slash and his damn top hat. And thank you to Lucky 13 Beard Co.
Log on to lucky13beardco.com, and if you've ever wanted to try a beard balm or oil before because your beard just isn't feeling the best that it can, these are the guys that can help you get feeling right and smelling right too, because they've got a ton of scents. They've got their own unique blend that they use of oils to help your beard feel its best. And we also have our own unique scent with them. It's called the Lemmy. It smells of everything that Lemmy from Motorhead was all about: bourbon, tobacco, cola, leather. You can't ask for anything more. It is one of the best smelling beard oils that I've ever smelled. Not just saying that because it's mine, but because the guys at Lucky 13 knocked it out of the park, and they do it with all of their scents that way. So log on, lucky13beardco.com. Put anything in your cart, and because we're in tight with them and they like us, we're going to help you out and get 10% off of your entire order. Use the code EFP10 at checkout, 10% off of the entire order. Anything at lucky13beardco.com.
I know what you're thinking. Hey, Zach, my Guns N' Roses t-shirt, it's still in the dryer, it's still washing, it's been smelling for a while, I've been wearing it too much. I need a new t-shirt to rock around in. Well, guess what? We have Epic Footnote t-shirts, as well as hoodies, hats, and coffee mugs available for purchase. Go to the link in our bio where you can find out more. It's a great way to support us so that we can keep making podcasts like here, as well as also just, get get out that Guns N' Roses t-shirt. It's probably selling at this point. Wear something else and let your friends know, hey, I also listen to music podcasts about Guns N' Roses, not just Guns N' Roses songs. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you join us for another episode real soon.
Oh, sweet child of mine.
You don't have the rights for that.
Oh, sweet love of mine.
Stop it. It's costing us money.